I'll be going over the steps to install a Gate Nova adjustable trigger into a version 2 gearbox with a Gate Titan 2 Mosfet already installed. This trigger has 2 adjustment screws, one for over travel and one for trigger start position. This effectively allows you to fully tune your trigger sensitivity. Usually I start by backing off the adjustment screws before installing. This is just to make sure it'll fit. I want to caution that if you're disassembling the rifle with the trigger and the trigger spring, it's important to try and stabilize the trigger as you open the gearbox shell to avoid it getting pushed around or scraping against the Mosfet board as you open up your gearbox. Then we want to loose fit the trigger first with no trigger spring and slowly move it in the gearbox to make sure there's no contact on the lower Mosfet board. On the top half of the Gate Titan, you'll see 5 optical sensors, which are the sensors that detect the trigger movement and position. Putting the second half of the Mosfet board on and the gearbox shell on, still with no trigger spring, we want to fully test the trigger for conflict potential and range of motion. With this ICS split gearbox, it's super easy to look inside and watch the trigger move. In this build, what I was finding is the wiring on the Mosfet stuck out too high, and it had to be pressed down a little bit more to allow the trigger to clear without scraping on it. Once you're satisfied with trigger clearance, you can go ahead and test one more time with everything in, including the trigger spring. Once you've checked that all things are clear, you can fully assemble your rifle again and get into the Gate app for trigger calibration and programming. Inside the app, I'll select AEG and jump straight into the trigger settings. In my case, the Gate app warned me that the trigger wasn't calibrated, as this was the first time setting it up. So just click that warning and jump straight into the calibration step. To do the calibration, you pull the trigger and you have to hold it, and then click OK in the app. And then you release the trigger, and then hit OK in the app again. The trigger calibration will be confirmed after this, and in my case, 222 sensitivity levels were detected, which is insane. In the app now, you can also see that multitude of trigger positions and sensitivity settings, including the fire and release points, which can both be changed and tuned as you wish. Previously, there were just 5 primary trigger sensitivities tied to each of the 5 sensors. Gate definitely has made some adjustments to the Titan 2 and app functionality for trigger tuning since their last generation. Now that I've confirmed trigger operation, I'm going to go back and tune those adjustment screws to exactly how I want. Note that if you do the adjustment screws after, like I've done, you always want to go back and recalibrate your trigger and go through the settings process once again to verify that everything is set as you wish.